you go. It never gets cleaner. It just gets dirtier in here every day. I'm so sorry. Thank you for joining us today. I promise I'm gonna work on the rack and the boxes and everything. So today, it's for some reason the theme seems to be security and the unfortunate but understandable death of the Queen of England. We're not going to talk about that at all, but it just happened today randomly. I don't know why. I just thought I'd say it on September 8th.
I love how you've introduced it as a theme and then also prefaced it but we're not going to
We're not
talk.
going to talk about it, but it happened today. So it's like I'm sure somebody's going to ask about it. So I'm going to start this with a story. Okay. So the first, question that honestly, I just added this question. Okay. And by the way, we have Hayden with us, who's going to learn how to do infrastructure in French.
Apparently.
And we have Matt is with us as usual. Is Bernie Sanders' birthday today? What a weird day today is.
Yeah.
And we have Tony Faw and Dumb Chicken Biryani and a bunch of other amazing regulars in our chat as usual. So we have really great members of our chat, and I'll try to read their comments as well. They're not quite up to joining us, in voice yet, but they will eventually. Tomatoes here, a bunch of regulars. So the first question is: so today is going to be about security. So security is a big topic on my mind all the time, both for fun and profit, and to save the world kind of thing, and. And so the first question I made up here is how can I balance security and practicality? And I have a story about that. And then I'm just going to read the 3 questions for today so you can decide if you want to be here. The second one, and we're not going to do extra questions, which is unusual. I mean, I wasn't on yesterday. Should I allow remote access to my servers at home or at work through SSH? Let's put SSH in that question. Should I allow SSH remote access to servers? And the last question, how do I deal with bad management? And
I can fully agree with JavaGrunt's suggestion there of just no humans in prod.
Yeah, no humans in prod. Take the humans out of prod. So yeah. So I'm going to start with how much time I got? I'm going to keep I'm going to stay right on the time today. So I had something happen at work today that I'm going to do my very best to not cross ethical and legal boundaries by telling you about a vulnerability that was discovered at work today during a knowledge transfer from somebody who's leaving. And no one needs to imply that this was because of the person that was leaving. It was just during the process of, hey, tell me everything that we need to know after you leave so we can maintain it and go forward. And it was in that process that you actually end up doing sort of an informal audit of your systems, because a lot of times in my experience over the years has been that you don't even think about some of these decisions after they were made years ago. Some of the people move on and everything, and it's not really, you don't even really think of some of those systems until far, far later down the line when the person is supposed to be maintaining or did set them up or at least knows about it is now moving on, and that tribal knowledge is going to get transferred, right? And I don't mind saying that my entire team at this point has, almost all of them have turned over. So there's about 5, 6, 8 of us that are left, and we're all new at this point, except for one, and that person has not had direct responsibility over a bunch of stuff. Please, I'm asking you again, I use extreme, discretion when I talk about my place of employment, because I believe that that's the way you should be, especially if you're as visible as I am, talking about things. So I'm just going to ask for y'all to help me to maintain that as much as possible, and I'll go forward. Okay, so the story is this. So we're going through during the process of the handoff, and we're looking at some things, and we happen to see on the screen some things that are really bad. A major application in our infrastructure, which was set up temporarily to do some testing and has now become a core piece of our infrastructure, has still been set up with, as you guys are chuckling, right?
There is nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
There's this, oh yeah, nothing more permanent. Like don't make your hack too good, right? So if I
Don't
can't,
make your hack work. That's your first
yeah,
mistake.
don't make your hack work. If it's too good, and this gets into the management thing, it might get forced down your throat because it already works. It meets the deadline, right? So, and there's actually another reason that's a little bit worse that really triggers me, but we'll talk about that in a second. So, whatever the reason, this major piece of infrastructure um, has a password that is the same as the name of the application, is hard coded into an environment variable, and is stored in somebody's place that is not in GitHub or anything like that. Thank God. By the way, if you haven't heard of sealed secrets in Kubernetes, and this was not Kubernetes, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. But if you haven't heard of sealed secrets, I recommend people go look at that because it does allow you to save actual passwords in your Git repos without having to be compromised. It's pretty cool. So anyway,
Secondary recommendation to that is also Mozilla SOPs because they also allow you to encrypt stuff with a GPG key.
oh
So
yeah,
if you've got existing like GPG stuff, you can also look at that one.
wow, yeah, and that's it's not good. Not good to do that. So um, so I mean, there's a number of things to talk about here. So I don't have to tell you, hopefully, that that's a bad idea, right? So, um, and but the statement was made at one point. Uh, well, it was a matter of practicality. We wanted to do it quickly, and it's never caused any problems. And I immediately said that you know of, because I mean, it's a pretty big risk footprint. Um, and in fact, I'm quite confident that if our security team knew about it, that they would probably shut us down and have us fix it immediately before we put it back on. Um, and I'm getting really nervous here because I'm talking about stuff that kind of like separate me from my employer kind of stuff, get fired kind of stuff for revealing it. So I really want to be careful here. So this was discovered, and the attitude was, well, we never meant it to be permanent and it's around forever. So I'm going to ask you, I mean, I don't think I need to ask you why that's bad. If you don't know why that's bad, stick around, right? And we'll talk about that. Um, I think the more important question is, how do you practice an emphasis on security versus practicality? And I have to confess, unless it's my, and by the way, my home lab, this root access to your home lab server stuff, that was another case where I gave in on the practicality thing, and I was about to do something that would be less auditable, um, and less secure, frankly, from a blue team perspective. But it's my home lab, right? So how do you make those decisions? You need red team and security audits. Do you think that that's one of the answers, that you just a red teamer is literally like, oh my
I
gosh,
mean, I mean,
not like this.
I feel like it kind of depends on your threat landscape.
Yeah.
Because if you're working with a system that is somewhat more bespoke, if you're a company that builds software for other companies and you deploy it on their network, realistically speaking,
Mm-hmm.
the red team stuff should apply more to the network than to your code. I don't feel like, I mean, obviously you should like try and write secure code, that's a given.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like if you're doing something on-prem that
Yeah.
isn't going to be publicly accessible, I don't feel like there needs to be an emphasis on pen testing and that sort of thing, except at like the network level.
Yeah.
It's a completely different story if you're doing something that's publicly accessible, though, because people can and will try to break your stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a fact of life. Someone sees a new system, they will try and find ways to break it.
But I
We
get the
we had
sense. Go
a
ahead.
thing recently. There was this. I think the site's called Open Bug Bounty.
Yeah.
But we didn't post a bug bounty. But this guy randomly found a way to trigger a pretty painful security flaw in a website that we hosted.
Mm-hmm.
And just just like if he hadn't disclosed that to us through bug bounty, we would never have known.
Yeah.
And someone could have used that to exploit it. Somebody could have been using it to exploit it. I mean, luckily we went through, we checked, we made sure that that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
But all of that sort of thing, because we didn't red team that specific system, we had no visibility into
can I
it,
ask you a
'cause there was
question?
nobody who was trying to
Yeah.
look for ways to break it.
Yeah. So when you say that you caught them, so that's a blue team kind of thing. Talk about that for a
Yeah.
second. So was it a matter of looking in logs, or was it a matter of because we were going to talk about logging and auditing and things like that. Um,
So basically, the system that we use is fairly complicated.
yeah.
It basically allows us to audit any type of request that comes through to the website,
Oh,
plus
right.
any traffic that matches specific criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And we just sort of pluck those packets out of the air and inspect
You get to
them,
see them before they happen. Right.
as and when we need to use it.
Yeah.
So we were able to come through that system and basically just go through and figure out, figure out that this sort of thing had happened once, but given the information that we'd been provided by this guy who from the Open Bug Bounty, we
Mm-hmm.
determined that the exploit that happened once was him testing it and then disclosing it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond that, like we spoke with him privately and we made sure that he hadn't
The
used
scope.
it to exploit it.
Yeah.
And what else he could have found with that, and luckily it ended up being a smaller issue than we were worried about. But had we not had the auditability on our side and this random guy that decided to try and help us fix the issue instead of
A random guy that tried to help you fix the issue. I have something to talk about on that particular front too. But
yeah, it was a little bit strange. Because like I said, we didn't put out a we didn't put out a bug bounty for this.
yeah.
We didn't have an active bug bounty on any of our stuff
Oh
at the
boy.
time.
See, I mean that's a
And
scope thing. Guy
this
took a
guy
huge
just
risk.
comes through and submits this on this like open bug bounty site.
Yeah.
Luckily, like I said, we were able to inspect through. We made sure nothing had been breached. We made sure that there'd been no access to data.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really a data access flaw that he'd found. It was something else. But yeah, I mean, either way, like we resolved the issue. We made sure that nothing had happened from it, and
Mm-hmm.
all was well. But if because we hadn't red teamed that internally, that could have been used if people had found out ways to trigger the exploit by lots of people to do random stuff.
Yeah. So Tony Flatt says the most important thing you need, and this is somebody who consults on security. I can dox that about this person. Is executive buy-in. So how do you promote? How do you get that? How do you get executive buy-in? I mean, and by the way, okay, so a more broad question here. What am I supposed to do here? Do we volunteer the fact that we have this security vulnerability to our security team? I mean, right now that is not what is happening. I'll put it that way. Because we got stuff to go. This is the hardest part of this position to be in. So you find something out that's not right, and you immediately say this should go right to the top of our priority list. And the answer is, well, we have these other priorities that are far more important than this.
Yeah, honestly, I would give you my answer to that, but I don't have one.
Yeah.
I float this to my boss. I try and make it as clear as I can that it's like a big problem.
Yeah.
And then he works his magic on XX, and I end up with either sorry they didn't want to do it, or okay, shut everything down and fix it.
It
It's
depends
generally the former, not the latter,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and Tony Fott brings up another good point that it really is about the people conversation offline,
Yeah.
perhaps, because if you go in there guns blazing and saying, look at you, you bad. I mean, this is where all those, soft skills come in. And
Yeah.
I want to share a quick story that some of you may remember about somebody who did this uh, potentially the wrong way. I don't know if I can even say that, but I want to tell you about the consequences. This is a true story. This happened in 98 or 99. You can go look it up. Nothing I'm talking about is doxing anybody. This is all public record. But raise your hand if you know Randal Schwartz. And if you maybe you have a T-shirt that says "Save Randall" on it somewhere. Anyone? Anybody know? No, it's that old. We were talking about
No.
Pearl earlier today. That's kind of a hint. So Randal Schwartz, aka Merlin, was a and is to this day a very famous coder, and never really a hacker. He's a presenter. He wrote Learning Perl very famously, and Programming Perl, and I think he wrote Programming Perl. He wrote Learning Perl. So he is a big deal. He's been a big deal for me for a long time. I actually had drinks with him in a karaoke bar with my manager in Portland, Oregon, once upon a time, and we actually even had kind of a meme joke in our at Teleport saying anytime we would talk about hackers not looking like Zero Cool and that we'd say Randal Schwartz never wore silver hot pants. It was kind of our little joke. Randall's a phenomenal human being. He's a very kind heart, and dedicated his life to helping people learn things. But he also took an Intel job, and I don't know the details of the job. You'd have to go read about it. But during that time, Intel Randall's always been very focused on security and do things like that. So your story prompted this memory of mine. While he was there, this is a story regarding scope. While Randall was there, he was paid to do some Perl programming and some consulting on some other things, and he had access to a couple sensitive Unix systems, and he ran Jack the Ripper on, which is back then that was the password cracking tool, on the password file as an extra service. And Intel kicked him out, sent him a summons and won in court against him, convicting him of hacking. And John the Ripper, it's John the Ripper now. Back then it was John the Ripper. You're right. Sorry.
It's still used, Rob. It's still called John the Ripper.
Are they still using John the Ripper?
Still used today. Yeah.
I haven't used it in so long.
Yeah, it is. It's still like the top product for trying to.
Is it fantastic?
Yeah.
So he did the right thing for all the right reasons, but he wasn't being paid to do that. And the reason John is still ripping passwords, the reason that he lost is because the jury eventually had to answer one question: was he paid to do that? And if not, he wasn't authorized to do it. So even though he meant well and everything else, he still lost. And there was a huge fundraiser for him and everything because he had to do community service and he had to do all kinds of stuff. I mean, everybody, I think, including the people in the courtroom, knew that the guy wasn't an evil guy, but Intel decided to make him an example. They said, you are out of scope here, buddy. You're not allowed. I mean, we have to trust you here. We have to trust you telling us that this is the only thing that you've done to check our security for free, and that caused a lot of waves in the 90s back in the security field. Since this is pre-bug bounty, by the way. I mean, bug bounty hadn't even been conceived of a thing. The whole attitude regarding cybersecurity and hackers and pen testers and red team and all that in general has radically changed. And we're very, accepting of hackers as long as they're doing it for good, and we're providing them. But if you watch any a professional hacker, red teamer, they will tell you do not go out of scope. And Hayden, you were telling us that situation where somebody found that thing, and they came to you, but I mean, would you have been within your rights to say, wait a second here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like if we wanted to, because obviously we didn't have anything open at the time for
Yeah.
them to try and like claim against. So we absolutely could have done something about that.
Yeah.
But we chose to. The system in question wasn't particularly critical
Yeah.
that he raised the issue for, so we weren't that bothered about trying to push anything on him.
Right.
We said, we appreciate the disclosure and all that sort of thing. Just obviously, you've disclosed this to us now. We fixed the issue. Just
Now don't do it again.
yeah, pretty much.
So, and I may be overly paranoid about this because of that incident. And I've had to tell I mean, I've helped people gain hacker skills. My the first two people I ever mentored hacked a coffee shop within the first 5 minutes that we were in there. And I told them, I said, I want you to go in here and do port scanning and stuff, but don't do any hacking beyond that. And the guy's 12, and he turned his I knew the owner of the coffee shop, and I figured it was a safe, I later actually mentored her son as well, and he flipped his cigarette and says, "Mr. Rob, look, I'm in the router." And I'm like, "What?" And he literally showed me and the owner his access to the router, and all he did is Google the default. And so he port scanned it, looked up the thing, and then searched for the default and put it in there. It was barely hacking. But I said, "That's bad. You can't do that." And then I turned to this person and I said, so and so, why are you not? Because I didn't set it up. Somebody else set it. So, and we had to have a lesson. I'm like, look, you cannot just go in there. I mean, in that case, it was fine. But there was another case where we would go to Panera Bread to survey the landscape sometimes. And we went there once, and one of the people that was there didn't all the way go into the hacking, but he found that the company next to us was like wide open. He goes, "I'm going to go tell them right now." And he went marching off to go open the door and tell them. And I'm like, "Don't do that." And it wasn't speaking to hide the fact that he had done it, but it was like, you have to be, first of all, you didn't ask them if you could scan them. If you go in there and tell them, wag your finger at them.
Hey, I scanned your network and I got this.
I scanned your network and you need to fix this. And they're like, "Oh, you did? Huh?" Because here's the moral of the story. Don't embarrass people with your security discoveries, and don't do anything out of scope. I mean, nothing they did, either of them did, was illegal, but it could get somebody mad enough to try to make it legal into something that's legal. And so there's a couple times where I hacked somebody. One time I was at a training.
Not illegal until you get caught.
Yeah. Well, I was at a training, and there was this. They had this open reverse tunnel to get into the thing, and I wanted to be able to log into my system. I wanted to be able to get through the firewall so I could SSH into my home system, and I found a way to do that, I'll say. And I just used it, and I thought, oh my God. And I went home to my wife. I was like, the security here is totally horrible. And I was like, and she goes, "Well, you should tell them." And I'm like, I don't think I should tell them. Because if you tell them, then what? They're going to say, "Well, why are you using it?" and stuff. So, but when you're on a team that's in charge of operations, you got to get executive buy-in. You have to have a conversation with somebody. Do you blow the whistle behind their back, or something like that? I mean, it depends on what's at stake, I guess.
I almost feel like in some regards, Blue Team is harder than Red Team, because Blue Team is so much more corporate. There's so many more politics that you have to play.
You do.
I mean, obviously, Red Team, you need to know what you're doing. It's some pretty complex stuff, but you don't need buy-in to hack something. You need buy-in to spend to dedicate resources to secure something.
Yeah. And the one time that I caught, I don't know. To this day, I don't know if I did the right thing.
We do purple teaming.
Purple.
It's a
cross.
It's a combination of blue and red teams into a single team. Because we got a small security security team here where I work.
I could probably get into that because I love writing, malware and that kind of thing. Not for any negative purpose. I like to prove that things are broken, and it gives me great satisfaction. And I haven't done it very much lately. I'm just too busy doing, day job stuff kind of thing. But purple, hey, there's a purple heart Christy sent you, Matt, in the chat. So, so I think that these are good topics. So anyway, the question here. So related to your home lab, and how much time we got? Yeah, we got half an hour.
Yeah, half an
So
hour.
I don't know how long this one's going to go, but should you allow root access through remote SSH to your server? So this is a technical question. Ready, go.
So it depends on what type of information's on this server. That's my biggest concern. Yeah, I'll
What
let
kind
the
of
others go,
information?
or you go.
Yeah,
I think I
go
think
ahead.
personally, um, if you're building a home lab, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's just for you or not. You're building an operations environment.
Yeah.
You are building something to host services, whether or not those services are static, like just file storage, or more dynamic, like a database, doesn't matter. You are building some sort of hosting environment, some sort of ops environment in a home
Mm-hmm.
lab. And so, for me, and obviously I'm a little bit of an edge case here because I'm pretty much a lead sysadmin. I treat like the home lab stuff the same as I would a normal server because, like in my opinion, I get no value out of putting no security on something,
Yeah.
even if it's on-prem, because what's the point of not securing
Yeah.
it if there are still like ways to get in? Like someone could, if you've got something on a Wi-Fi, for example, somebody could just brute force your Wi-Fi
Oh yeah.
password. Bam, now they
Absolutely.
have network access.
That's
You
a lot
know?
harder is to secure your Wi-Fi. So in
Yeah.
a home lab environment, it does. I think I mean the bottom line again. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. But I agree with that. In fact, specifically, I think one of the reasons that this security vulnerability that we found today at work happened was because the original engineers were thinking of this as a lab. And so they were thinking, oh, it's just like my home lab. This is just for us to mess around and see if it works and integrate it. And boom, pretty soon they had dependencies. There's that one user they gave access to, and now there's 10, and now they're locked into it. I think, at least I'm a little bit more pedantic that way, which is I'm glad I was reminded of that because I was starting to lean back towards it's not nearly as convenient to set up root SSH, mostly because, and I'm going to make this contention. What's the difference between SSH, as root with public key cryptography, or SSH as a user who has unlimited sudo su ability without a password? And
Yeah.
we argued quite a bit about this, but uh, when it was made known to me that there's auditability in the sudo thing, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to I'm paraphrasing really quickly here, but I'm just going to overwrite all the logs, and I'm gonna erase all my tracks and audit D and every place else with sudo. If I had, so what's the same? What's the difference? And to be fair, I was getting ready to set up SSH over to a system so I could just run SSH remotely and just run commands without as root over there. And because I was trying to avoid Ansible, and yes, Ansible is going to come in here. Um, so, what do you think of Ansible for security?
Um,
And we're going to talk about that one next. So that and it's well, what about auditability? And I was like, well, it's a home lab. I don't need to audit it. And then I got thinking, well, because I can delete the logs and everything. And then they're like, well, how would you even catch auditing in the enterprise? I go, well, we send all our syslogs and audit logs to a central server, so they can't be removed by the hackers because it's an enterprise and it's a bank or something, assuming that
yeah.
was the kind of thing. And so that was the convincing factor. And then this goes back to your point, Hayden, about, well, if you're going to do a home lab and one of your primary motivations of doing a home lab is modeling best practices in the enterprise, then I was like, oh, that's right. I probably need to set up, I have like 30, 20 machines right now. I probably should set them up to all send to a central logging server as a part of this whole thing. And I had totally forgotten about that piece of it because of auditability, right? So I know it's just me, and I don't need to make sure this is me versus some other admin that screwed up. But practicing auditability and log centralization and what's the best tool for that. I mean, that's the reason you have a home lab, is to practice those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, So there are multiple ways to sort of go about that. The reason why I generally push Ansible is because it makes it very easy to define a template that you can use for, let's say SSH config. It makes it very easy to just define a template for that, and then add and remove components of it depending on the need, depending on the needs. So, for example, we have internally we host our own GitLab just due to the nature of some of our stuff. We don't want it on public Git.
Yeah.
One of the modifications that we need on an SSH config is the ability to log in as the Git user from specific IP addresses, i.e., basically, if it's not on the subnet that our dev machines are on, you can't use the Git user over SSH. That's not something that we want on all of our servers, but with Ansible, we can deploy the same playbook to those servers and have it pick up from, our automation tool that actually, or not the automation tool, but our source of truth tool that actually stores all those servers and metadata for them. That can tell Ansible, hey, by the way, this is a GitLab server, and then Ansible goes, okay, I'll add that. I'll add
this
that
thing
part
gets
of the
a new
template.
thing. Yeah. Composability, kind of, not really, but it is
I
of like.
You say that, but it basically is.
It's interfaces
because we're
in
composing the SSH config based on variables in a separate system that inform Ansible where it needs to run stuff.
Yep, and the first in terms of security, I was reminded today. So in case you're wondering, there's a couple of things that have rubbed me the wrong way with Ansible. One, I've seen some bad Ansible recipes, and I was like, I don't want that anywhere near my system. And two, there's the bloat of Ansible and Python, and those were my main arguments against it. But I'm convinced, I'm being kind of tilted over to do it today after having done the SSH config, because it can do things with elevated permissions, using sudo and stuff like that, without you having to enable root on your system or something. I mean, that's just, what is it? There's run as, and then there's become, I think you said. And say, I don't know Ansible. I'm just telling you right now, I need to learn it.
So become is kind of like the catch-all for any type of privilege escalation you want to do. So if you have a standard user and you want to escalate to root, you can just use become on its own. But for example, become can also handle situations where, say you have a backup, like a backup user and that's the only user that has permission to restart your backup monitoring software or whatever. You can use Ansible to say, right, get the password for the backup user and escalate privileges to that instead of root, as well as being able to just go straight to root.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of configurability with how become behaves.
And then we have Tiny Fuzz says, have you set SSH certificates? We did look at the CA certs versus individual user certificates, and I still want to get my head around whether the CA stuff is more hassle or less than just adding something to authorize keys on the target.
SSH CA is it can be useful, but it doesn't provide the same level of auditability that you get out of something like
I hadn't thought of that.
And even if you look at what it does audit, it kind of audits the wrong part of the process, because you can audit that user has a valid certificate from your CA, so you know that certificate is valid for the period that it's been generated for. But what you can't audit is who is using that certificate that's been generated. You can't audit what they've done once they've logged in. All you can really capture is the user in the certificate.
So in a multi-user
the IP
system,
address. But if you've got DHCP, that IP address could be changing all the time.
You're right, and as Tony Foss says, it does depend on the scale. So I could see applications for both of those. I mean, one where there's no users on the system. If anybody's accessing it, there's some other tool that we're going to go audit instead of that. I imagine there's a lot of automation involved with SSH certs, as opposed to
generally.
He could also set up an IP table for SSH to only allow from his IP.
Host IP.
That's another
I mean,
space.
I mean, yeah, but just more generally speaking, that still leaves you in the same position where it's like, cool, I can
With
validate
auditing.
that this has come from this IP, but if I'm using DHCP, what if my IP changes? Well, now, shit, I'm locked out from everything.
I think
You know?
he's using static, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, but like in
Yeah.
an environment, like let's say that he wanted to move to DHCP later on, that no longer works. Like you could allow the entire subnet, but then you don't deal with the problem. You just go back to square one practically.
Yeah, I think for my specific case, I want to emulate a multi-user, a multi-admin environment, we should say. And anytime you have a multi-admin environment, you want auditability. And so that's for me, for my own home lab, I'd probably be doing that. If I was just hacking and making software for hacking and operations and stuff, I probably wouldn't care about that. By the way,
Yeah, like I think anything that's more like anything that's just a throwaway. I've set this up to test with.
Yeah.
I will give absolutely no regard to security for, because I know that I'm probably gonna delete it in like 2 hours.
Yeah, but that's exactly
anything
what got
that
us
is
in this
more-
trouble. Is that this whole
Yes,
infrastructure
but
piece?
You
It's just this
see
one
the
little
thing.
thing.
You see the thing with that is that I run VMware on my PC.
Yeah.
So if they want it, they can't have it.
Me too. That's actually another reason that I'm glad you said that, because it was a side effect. It was a positive side effect of having running a VM on my main system. Is that this is the only place the certs exist. So if this VM is shut down, there's literally no way to connect to these systems. Period. There's no. I mean, you have to hack them some other way, but no official way. So there's no. I love that, because even if somebody were to hack my Windows system, and I'm kind of giving my own secrets away here, but whatever, they would have to go to great lengths to get into that VM and find the stuff that's there. And even then, a lot of that stuff isn't even in there. It's
All right, Rob, how many printers do you have open in your house now?
yeah, and all they on the same subject. I know we get
How many cup services can I brute force when I go to Rob's house for the first time?
It's funny you say that, because the first
Those
time
hackers are getting in through printers now.
though they've been doing
scary.
that since the 90s. When I was at Teleport, they had the cops come and monitor the keystrokes of a hacker in real time who had broken in through a printer port through our internet service provider. And it was
that still happens.
It still happens. It's been happening forever. And people don't even know that they have these things running.
So
I have a printer
it's
online.
stupid, and this is internal network setup is something that we've disclosed publicly before as well, so I'm not doxing anything by saying this. But so to deal with that specific problem, we have an entire VLAN that is dedicated to printers.
Wow, just the printers.
that cannot call out, but other things can call into.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
there is no way for someone to breach the network through a printer, because they all get shoved straight onto this VLAN.
Yeah, and WPS is totally, you can brute force us. Yeah, and
segmentation.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I want to get into. I have been contemplating segmentation just as an exercise, but there's again that practicality thing in a home lab. If I have too much of that, I mean, I'll be spending literally all of my home lab time, doing VLAN configuration.
It's a lot of effort for a home lab. See, I feel like with a home lab, I hold myself to relatively high standards for security, but not necessarily I'm running an enterprise out of my garden security,
Yeah. I mean, anything that's on the Wi-Fi, minimally, I think you should separate all of your Wi-Fi access and printers.
Yep. If you have any IoT devices, get them away from your home stuff. Segment them away, like smart bulbs, everything.
Yeah. And I thought about doing that, putting some sensors up there and thing, and that's something that I think everybody needs to do eventually. Of course, I'm wired on everything that matters, so for performance and for security. I mean, it's amazing how much security you get just by plugging a wire in instead of going Wi-Fi.
Because I mean, if you go Wi-Fi, cool, all your traffic is now available over Wireshark with something on listen mode instead.
Well, I have them right here. I have the alpha dongles that you can run in promiscuous mode. They have the hardware set.
Yeah.
They can sniff anything. It's not like in the old days when you had my LTN Bob told me about this. But in the old days, you'd have a wire plugged into one end and another end, and then to sniff, you'd have to, watch everything between that wire. But now, with one of these modems that's configured in promiscuous mode and monitor mode. That's it. So it has to have hardware enablement for monitor mode. But if it has monitor mode, it can literally look at every packet from everybody anywhere.
and it regardless of whether it's connected to that network or not,
it can just
still
sit there.
Sniff the packet.
And it doesn't even have to hack it right there. It could just put it all in a file, and then you go rent, however many MIPS of time on Amazon and crack everything, and you're done.
Nasty.
What's that? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I follow Hack5 because I'm studying the cyber field right now.
Yeah.
They got a Wi-Fi pineapple. It's called.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember being like
pretty nasty device.
I remember being 15 and wanting to get the USB rubber ducky and the Wi-Fi pineapple just because I thought they were like cool to play around with.
So it's basically this Hack5, Rob, is they basically recreated a lot of the hacking, the pen testing tools that were used in Mr. Robot.
Some of those fun things.
You should check it out
but
sometime.
They've made them like
neat.
mass producible and like very, very, very freely available.
As the dude says here that these days you can use, what is it, HCX dump tools to stiff passwords like this right out of the air traffic without making any noise. That's so fascinating. I mean, and it's definitely terrifying actually. But so we're talking about home lab and security and worrying about it and everything. And I don't want to scare everybody, but today security has been on my mind. Security is often on my mind. And in fact, I don't know. I particularly related to applications development, putting things in environment variables. I think you should be fired for that sometimes. Honestly, it's like such a blatant disregard for security. I've seen code where people embed, they embed the password inside of the compiled code.
Policy in place too for. I don't know. That's a tough one.
The way that we handle that, because we've started as of 6 months or so ish, a lot of our application stuff is now deployed onto Kubernetes. So all of our .env stuff only holds like the non-sensitive data, things like what is the name of this instance, that sort of thing gets put in the .env. Mm-hmm. But anything that's like, this is actual like service discovery and configuration stuff, the .env variable, like the environment variable for that is literally just, hey, look in this file to get that, and now you can't just inspect the pod to get what our database credentials.
Well, that's how it should be, and the Kubernetes secrets are pretty good if you've got your Kubernetes configured properly. Exactly. Zero Trust, Tanifa says, don't have any of your devices trust each other at all. And I really want to do that, but I don't know how I would do it at home. I need some
Zero Trust and least privilege.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of the Zero Trust stuff relies pretty heavily on not on-prem tools as well.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard to justify doing that at home, because then you're looking at doing like license fees and all the rest of it.
For some of it, I don't know. I'm just getting it. We did read a lot about it the other day, but I'm still just going to go through network segmentation for now, and particularly with the Wi-Fi thing. And then provide auditability. I think honestly, I don't think you need to be as afraid if you have really good blue team auditability. That's how I caught. I mean, I've talked the story before, but that's how I caught the hacker who set up a rootkit on my mail server once upon a time. It was because I had set up a blue team tripwire thing that found his little rat's nest while I was making it, and I was able to monitor him. And and there's a funny story there, because I actually went to where he hacked from his IP and wondered if that system had been compromised using the same. I used his exact code. I stole his code from him because it was there, and I used his same code to connect to where he came from, and sure enough, it had no password. It was completely compromised. It turned out to be a college which shall be unnamed, very important college, and it was an account of a beer swilling football fan. It was not him, and I reported it to the college. And actually, that whole story about being careful who you report it to, they never answered me, and I'm kind of glad that it may have just fallen on the floor. No, I'm not going to tell you the college. I probably will get it because technically I hacked him. Because technically, I used that exact same software to connect to see where he was coming from, thinking it was going to be him. It wasn't. It was just one of his launch points. I'm assuming it was a guy. I don't know. And
they got into your home, Rob?
What's that?
They got into your home network? Or?
Yeah. This was a long time ago. This was when I set up I had a public-facing Linux machine that I had turned into an internet facing mail server, DNS, and everything else. And they had just scanned me and found a vulnerability in some of the software I had, and they had started trojaning my LS command and everything like that. And I set up all this stuff to connect them. It was back when I would use, this is a long time ago. I mean, this is back when, Telnet was still being used and stuff like that. And it was also,
I think you mentioned your mail server. Yeah.
yeah, I remember Gmail was not even HTTPS back then. Can you guys imagine that? This had to have been. Let's see, my son was born, so that was, yeah, it was 2001. Yeah, no, yeah, it was 2000, 2001. Sometime it was 2002 actually. In 2002, Google was not encrypted. Google Gmail was not encrypted. Netscape was king, and I used to read for fun. I would yell to my wife in the other room that she forgot a letter in her password, because I had a I had a password filter on just to practice it, and I would, anything that had the word password in any HTML that went through, it would go into a log file in real time, and I'd get an alert or something. And I remember yelling to her in the other room one day. I was like, "You forgot it." She got mad. She got so mad at me. I never once ever did anything with it, but the fact that Gmail was sending passwords in the clear that I could sniff off HTTP was just terrifying. And I mean,
Yeah.
this is pre HTTPS. Thank God we have it now, right? I don't think people understand how insecure things were. Telnet, FTP, all that unencrypted stuff. So on that note, the last one, we have 10 minutes for this. So I guess, we could make a segue, something about management and being parents in a house where you're managing your whole family's network. But the last question, and this does relate to security, is how do you deal with bad management? And I think the first thing I need to say about that is, what do you mean by bad management? I think people have different opinions on that, but I don't know. This is one where I really honestly do not have a really solid answer for this. I've been avoiding this question because I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
The best I can say is leave and find a good one.
I don't either. That's why I asked it.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by management in this context?
Good consistent answers. Yes. I don't know. I mean, I know what I've had good managers and I've had bad managers in my estimation. My estimation of a bad manager, I mean, that's the thing. Everybody wants something different out of their manager. That's why I have a hard time answering this.
Yeah.
Some people want really, micro direction and hands-on. Some people want the manager to barely remember their name and get out of the way. I
can't elaborate more, Hayden. Sorry,
Sure.
I'm currently working, so.
Fair enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that, I mean, there are some qualities of good managers that I just think go without saying, but I'll say them anyway. I mean, they should be willing to listen to you and make time for you. I read a thing today, and it was actually in my feed, that said, how do you know if you're being quietly fired? And I didn't know this was a thing, but it relates to this question. You can't get time with your manager. Other people are getting all of the the assignments. You are being asked to do more performance review stuff than is necessary. And I mean, the whole premise of the whole quiet firing thing is they don't have the guts to just cut you loose. So they make it intolerable. You don't get raises. And we talked about that yesterday or 2 days ago. You don't get raises in time. So you basically take a $4,000 pay cut every year or so because you're not, you're not keeping up with the rate of inflation. And there's all these passive ways to fire you. It starts by being left out. You're not getting invited into the meetings. Ways to fight that. But a good manager is, first of all, I think they're going to be forthright with you. If something's not right, they're going to come up and they're going to say, first of all, they're going to seek you out. They're going to seek to have some form of communication with you regularly. And if they don't do that and you ask for it and they don't want to do it because they're too busy or whatever, I think the only way to handle that is to leave. And make sure that your skills are good enough to leave. And I don't think that that's as scary as it needs to be in the age of technology.
Well,
Um,
that's a fair enough answer. Do you have anything to add, Hayden?
Um, I mean, in terms of like what I look for in management, I guess I kind of echo what Rob said about like, you know, they should be willing to give you time that's needed in order to sort of convey thoughts and that sort of thing. I feel like one thing that is really important for me personally, and I don't know if this is just because I'm pig-headed and stubborn about things I say, but uh, for me, if a manager can't take criticism, then I don't want to stick around.
yeah,
Because if you're
yeah,
trying to tell me that as a manager who, in most cases, doesn't end up interacting with the system and doesn't end up being the one that does most of the grunt work, I understand you might be more senior than me, but if
yeah.
I'm trying to raise a problem that I'm seeing, and you're, gonna turn around and say, "Oh, it's worked for 15 years. It can't possibly be broken now," and then, I'm not gonna give the like that company the time of day.
Right. No, I cannot agree more with that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they come forward. I mean, Izzy has said, if even the slightest performative goes down, I go to them straight away and ask them instead of going and telling someone else or this person is doing bad and then should we strike them? Yeah. So having a conversation, I think that is um, the way to go. We have conversations with each other regularly, right? Right,
Yeah.
Izzy? There's dinner.
Barbecue chicken, asparagus.
Oh my gosh. What's for dinner? That's the last question, it looks like.
Barbecue chicken, asparagus, and roasted potatoes. You're laughing at the asparagus, aren't you?
Yeah, my wife has
I
been.
had to make asparagus.
Who is this who just interrupted us? So I'm going to put this. You're now on YouTube forever, Doris.
What?
I
Yeah, bring her
can't.
in. We want
I'm
to
in the
say
middle of
hello.
a talk show, but you're
It's a
welcome
good
to
way
come
to
join
end
us.
the Q&A today. Bring her in the room.
All right.
Hi.
Hi. I think
You're
on that.
actually interviewing someone.
Yeah, on that note, I think I should probably go eat dinner. So that's my wife, Doris, and that's a good place to do. The bad management thing. Honestly, I think one of the best ways to deal with it is to find somebody else that you can talk to about it and let them listen to you and just reflect you back to you so you can figure it out on your own. I think the management question is super important that you answer it for yourself. I had a manager that I stayed with far too long. I stayed with him for probably a year, and I would have left much earlier if I had been able to, talk through the issue, and also if I had kept certain of my skills more fresh. They were constantly weighing me down with extra work, and I wasn't ever able to build up the skills to get a new job, and it was like a double-edged sword, and that's kind of the hard part about that, yeah, it's a tough one. Izzy says you don't like being imaginable to be horrible to the staff. Uh, I talk to them before I make sure life is going all right and just report it to HR. Yeah, yeah. Going to HR is kind of a hard thing. So I wish you the best on that. Stay tuned if you want to watch me mess with security some more. We're going to be doing some more NFS setup and system setup. But other than that, I'm just going to say thank you to our panel again. Thank you so much, Hayden, for being here. You talked me into not doing root access, even in my home lab. So I'm going to be. The world's going to be a safer place because of you.
I would be happy to spend hours upon hours talking you into using Ansible instead of Perl as well. So
Yeah.
just
Oh, that's
hit me
right.
up
We
with that one.
we're going to be doing some Ansible, and I mean I love Perl. Don't get me wrong. I think Perl's a better hacker language, but I'm going to do my hacking and Go. So
Yeah.
I
mean, if you
have
put all of
decided.
that stuff into like a GitHub, I can go through and just do like a mini code review of it and just like point out anything
Yeah.
that I'd notice.
Yeah, I'm going to do all of my Ansible rules live, and I'll probably start some of that tomorrow. I want to get my NFS and Kubernetes installed first today, and then we'll be back, and
Yeah.
I'll be doing. I think I've pretty much decided to try an entire Ansible deployment, and then I can complain about it the whole time, and you can tell me where I'm wrong, and Het can tell me where I'm wrong.
Well,
And
this is why I'm saying make a Git repo because I can't because it's
Yeah,
half past midnight.
yeah, totally. All right, everybody. Matt, we'll see you later too. Have a good one. Ciao.